So I finished reading the Metro 2033 trilogy and I want to make videos about it. I get so engaged with the story and the universe of this series that I can't stay quiet about it. Before I start, I want to warn you that these videos will contain a lot of spoilers, so if you want to read the books and or play the game, you should do it first. Anyway, what's this all about? In 2005, Dmitry Glukovsky, a Russian journalist and reporter, published his first book, The Metro 2013. This is where everything started and where he started to gain fame. In this series, I will only talk about the 3 books and the games, so I won't include all the accepted fanfictions because there are a lot of them. Anyway, I will show you a timeline of the events, but the games and the books are slightly different and that many times the stories can't really be put together. In these cases, I will talk about both of the scenarios, but I tried my best and I tried to create a coherent world by merging the 2 stories. Many of the sources don't even match the map of the Moscow Metro, so it was kind of hard to gather and put together all the information. But that's enough of praising myself, and let's get down to the video. So here you can see a map of the Moscow Metro. It is a current one, but when Dmitry have written the books, many of these lines didn't exist, so we have to travel a bit back in time. This is the metro that Dmitry used. The enormous metro tunnel system that runs beneath the city, creating one of the most fascinating public transport systems in the world. You will never see anything like these stations. But it's more than just a transport system. The Russians didn't want to risk anything in the Cold War, so they made most of the metro nuclear proof. By this, they have created the world's biggest nuclear shelter, capable of saving tens or even hundreds of thousands of people from certain death. But the metro is still bigger than this. Under the Moscow Metro there are several other things like bunkers and secret tunnels. So what we see on this map, some people say it isn't even the third of what lies beneath Moscow. However, most of these secret things were never revealed for the public and probably it will never be. Anyway, back to the topic. The story takes place in the Moscow Metro, which you can see here. Now let's take a look at what does this consist of. To include everything, I have to say there isn't just one metro, but there are actually 2 of them. The Metro 2 is actually a topic for another video, but I have to let you know that it is there, probably. At least in the story, it is there for sure. Now the tunnels, as you can see, go all over the place, but there is one line that is particularly important, and it is the brown one. It is the so-called ring, which connects the whole metro and provides an easy access to every line. This line separates the metro into 2 sections, or at least in the minds of the people. There are the outskirts, how I like to call them. These are the stations which are outside of the ring. These stations are mostly connected to only 1 or 2 stations, but the people from here will mostly go inwards. These stations are like the suburbs of a city, and the downtown is what's inside the ring. Inside the ring, the metro gets more interconnected. Finding connections between the lines will be much easier. The people like to call it the Great Metro. They always refer to it like this when they reach the ring, because basically the metro opens before them. This is the more important part of the metro, because the bigger stations and connections are here, and also this is where the majority of the people live. The book, by the way, was way more depressing and much more realistic than the game. The game was much happier in a certain way, and it had a relatively happy ending, while the book didn't end as I have expected. So yeah, we could say that the books were like a true Russian realist novel, while the game was much more romantic. So when did this all start? In 2013, the Third World War broke out, and as they said in the books, the war lasted for just an hour. They described how the world went silent in just minutes, and only those survived who were able to find refuge. However, not all survivors were lucky as the ones in the metro. To survive this nuclear holocaust, for a few people, a sealed place was enough to save their lives, like a currency exchange booth. Needless to say that their fate was sealed and they just had a much slower and more painful death. The last survivors died within just a few days. However, not all people died on the surface. Most of the war had targeted large population centers, so many people survived the war, but this will be a topic for another video. Let's focus on our metro in the year 2013. 33, where the story begins. We have 4 bigger factions that we have to talk about, because these are the ones that really dictate the life of the metro dwellers, and also they represent the 4 main ideologies in the story. Let's start with the most important one, the Hanza. The Hanza, or the Commonwealth of the Stations of the Ring Line, which is the most powerful in the metro. They rule all of the stations on the Ring Line or the Brown Line, and this is where their symbol comes from. This is a relatively democratic faction, but very xenophobic, so they rarely accept outsiders, and to travel through their stations, all people require passports and identifications. But gathering people isn't their main focus. They keep their numbers low, so they are able to provide probably the highest life standards in the metro. Their stations are clean, they have the best equipment and well-trained soldiers. They achieve this by basically having a monopoly over the trade in the metro. They rule the Ring Line, which I said is the most important of all of the lines because it provides the easiest access to every other line. This way, transporting goods in the metro is the safest and cheapest through the Hanza, even though they take customs. This is what made these stations the wealthiest in the whole metro and what made the Hanza the most powerful. Only one faction was and is capable of challenging the Hanza, and it's none other than the Red Line. The Red Line's name actually have 2 meanings. For one, the faction rules the Red Metro Line. Second, they are communist. So it all fits together nicely. They rule over almost all of the stations on the line, except for the Borovitskaya and the last 3 stations after the famous metro bridge, which I will talk about later. As I said, they follow the communist way of life, so they don't use money and live equally by very strict rules. This is the typical Stalinist dictatorship led by Maxim Moskvin. Their great advantage lies within their great numbers. From the 40 or 50,000 residents of the metro, they accommodate an estimated 15,000 of them. This way they can have a huge army, even if it's not as professional as the Hanza's army. They are able to seize every opportunity to take over the whole metro and achieve the interstational metro. But the life of the Red Line residents is tough, and their society faces many problems very often. Their main rival aside from Hanza is the emerging Fourth Reich, who are basically playing Nazis in the start. However, they realize that with the thinking that only healthy Russians can be accepted in their society, they limit their manpower severely. So they tweak their ideology and turn to a more social Darwinist approach, where they mark the so-called mongrels as their main enemy. They make people believe that all of these mongrels want to take over the metro and they have to stop them. This way, there are no eternally privileged and eternally condemned people, just healthy and unhealthy people. Also, the head state of a person can always change, so they have to live in constant fear of becoming a mongrel, thus making everyone more obedient. They form their army called the Iron Guards, for which they gather volunteers from all over the metro. Now, anyone can be a mongrel, because the officers tell who is one and who isn't, so they can gather soldiers and slaves at the same time. They don't kill the slaves as long as they are useful. They use them to follow the idea of the Lebensraum and expand their living space radically. And this is of course all led by the Führer. It's not known how many stations do they influence, because in the game they rule over several stations, while in the book they only rule 3. But it's possible that they have reached some independent stations. Their symbol is said to be a swastika with 3 branches representing the 3 stations that they rule, and the 4th branch will be added when they can finally conquer the Polis. Which leads us to our last faction, the Polis and the Rangers of the Order. The Polis is probably the most democratic faction in the metro, led by the council, where they probably gather members in some kind of a democratic or meritocratic way. They use a so-called caste system like in India, but instead of getting born in a caste, you can choose one when you turn 18. You can be a servant, a Shudra, a merchant, Vashya, a soldier, Kshatriya, or a scientist, Brahmin. The 2 most important from these are the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, because the Great Library and also the Ministry of Defense is close to the stations, so the former scientists and military leaders gathered here when the war broke out. These 2 castes also form 2 parties, and based on the needs of the situation, one of the 2 gets the leadership. In peaceful times, the Brahmins lead, and they invest more in culture and development, while the Kshatriyas are often elected in war times, so they can militarize and defend the stations if needed. And also there are the Rangers of the Order. They don't belong to Polis, rather they form an independent peacekeeping militarist organization whose headquarters are located in Polis. I think this is all we could fit in today's video. In the second part we will talk about the smaller factions. If you liked it, please give it a like and subscribe, and also if I forgot something, please mention it in the comments. Also, you can reach all the sources including my self-made map in the description. See you in the next video.